Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Out of the Blue Artistry, where we desperately seek the sanity through creativity. And today we'll be making a house out of a hat box. I'll be real with you, this will be part one, and I was going to keep it a little surprise, but it's going to be a Mad Hatter's studio. You don't know it, but right now I'm pulling a silent, excited squeal face, and it kind of looks like this. So without further ado, this is my hat box. It's about 35 years old, it was a gift, and has done a lot of miles. I used it to trace and cut out two pieces of foam. One is larger than the other, however both will be covered in wood craft sticks and act as levels to our unusual little house. After gluing on the wood to look like floorboards, I'm cutting them to shape with scissors. However, in hindsight, I should have retraced the box shape on top of the wood and then cut along that for accuracy, but it is what it is. And I'll remember that for next time. I traced and cut out a piece of chunky cardboard for the floor and set it aside for now, while I moved on to trying to figure out some stairs. I traced again onto some cardboard to get the curve of the box and used a piece of wood to measure out a width to cut. This wasn't greatly accurate, but it wasn't a disaster either. On double checking if the pieces fit, I decided to go ahead with it. I'm using some iridescent paint that I had on my shelf to paint out the inside and act as a glue for this textured mulberry paper, which I'll paint over again with the iridescent paint. This will texture and strengthen and colour the inside of the box. Then I glued some scrapbook paper to my floor with PVA, then covered the paper again with PVA to seal and give it a little shine. The paper looks like fancy tiles. While that's drying, I'll move on to the headache that is the stairs. I cut a stack of paddle craft sticks and shaved a tiny bit from the side of every second piece, which will curve my steps as they go up or, go down, whatever you like. After a little sand, I stuck painter's tape upside down on my desk so I could arrange my steps. I realised I needed a slight gap between each set for them to fold correctly. Then I painstakingly glued the steps onto the cardboard, trying to achieve right angles. I also made a tiny set for the first floor. I inserted the floor when it was dry and glued my raised floor in next. You might notice the messy gaps in between the floor and wall, but I'll cover that up later. Stick with me. The curve of the steps is more extreme than I wanted, so I adjusted it a little with some brute force, then coloured it with a wash of acrylic ink and water. I have some pretty gold trim I'll use to cover the exposed side of the stairs and act as a safety rail. I glued more gold trim across the top level as another safety rail and to continue the design. So far, so good. Meanwhile, I had to buy a heap more wood from the bargain shop because I'd almost run out. Some of the big craft sticks, I traced the curve of the box and cut to shape to cover up the gaps in between the floors and the walls. See, I told you I'd fix it. And I think it's a nice detail that I'll probably end up covering it up with bits and pieces anyway. We'll see. Now let's look at doing some windows. I'll pop the lid on to see where the lip comes down to and give the box more strength while I cut it. I'll use something round to trace the top of my windows because I'm going to do 3 huge arch windows on one side and a door and 2 normal windows on the other side. And just a tiny peephole window at the very top floor. But we need to cover the messy cardboard edges, so I'm using some Hessian tape to cut up and to cover them and make them nice and neat. Most tapes, ribbons or even thick paint would do this little job. I personally wanted it to look like an old but well looked after building, so went with this because it's natural, rustic and was easy to curve around the arches. I used some more large craft sticks to trace and cut to the curve of the box so I can make some shelves to pop in under the stairs. I felt it was a good idea to reinforce the lid, so I taped up the edges where needed and used some more of that acrylic iridescent paint to colour and glue some of the tissue paper on the inside. It should still fit snugly when dry and give me a texture for the ceiling, while also adding strength to the lid. I decorated a piece of Hessian tape for the front door mat. It says, "We're all mad here," and stuck it at the front door. I used some beautiful deep purple scrapbook paper for the wallpaper, defining the top level area and breaking up the lower for some interest. Some pencil to hide the white lines of the paper where they're butted up against each other, and smudging it with my finger in an attempt to make it a bit more seamless. I used this wooden ring to hide the edge of the round window on the inside because it was messy. I grabbed out one of my awesome molds that I often forget exists and filled it with some gold glittery hot glue. Foam clay is also great to use, but hot glue is much faster. Most of these I'll pop in my drawers for another day, but I'm definitely making and using a few of these columns to glue along the top of the ceiling for fancy cornice type decoration. These ceiling roses I'm sure will come in handy along the line there somewhere. In the meantime, I'll glue and peg the decorative strips in place to adhere. I'd like to thank you for hanging out with me. If you found value in my video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more. I hope you do check out part 2 of the Mad Hatter's Studio and check out some of my other videos. In the meantime, please stay safe, sane and creative, my Sanity Seekers. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.